Well, look, all Australians, the point we're making, should be disturbed at the direction in which this so-called climate debate is heading. You can't move or read or speak without everything being climate change. And there aren't too many, let's be honest, who are prepared to stick their heads up on what are often an uninformed, poorly researched and on many occasions factually inaccurate arguments in defence of so-called climate change. Remember, it used to be global warming, but when the planet didn't warm as they wanted it to, it's now called climate change. It's reached the point of hysteria. Every other person to whom you speak will tell you it's pumped out in the classroom, in universities, in the media and in the corporate boardrooms. It is the new phony religion. I've mentioned several times, and Peter mentioned before, the Dorothea McKellen, My Country. Everyone talks about it. But what they won't tell you is it was written when Dorothea McKellen was 19 in 1904. She wrote then about a sunburnt country and drought and flooding rain and a pitiless blue sky, quote, when sick at heart around us we see the cattle die. But then the grey clouds gather and we can bless again the drumming of an army, the steady soaking rain. This is 1904, explaining the cyclical nature of climate and weather. Drought, flooding rains, cattle dying, what she called a willful, lavish land. The juxtaposition of the adjectives is important. A country which is willful on one hand and lavish on the other. 1904. No talk of global warming then, no coal-fired power stations. You can see Chris Kenny every day of the week here at 5 p.m. He's outstanding. One of the few people prepared to step into the ring. He's written previously that since November 2019 to the middle of January 2020, the phrase climate change was used more often in the media than the words disaster or devastation. Climate change mentioned across the media almost 900,000 times. This is propaganda on steroids. Then the word unprecedented, as Chris pointed out, used in the media almost 200,000 times in 2 months. I tried today in Sydney's Daily Telegraph on page 13 to provide some perspective on all of this. 4 days ago, far from being unprecedented 4 days ago, and far from being what a former Prime Minister has called utterly without precedent in our history, of course, this is again the forgettable Malcolm Turnbull, about whom Peter and I have already spoken tonight, re his contradictions and hypocrisy on the issue of coal-fired power. Well, every utterance of Turnbull these days reeks with a revenge mentality against the party which rightly got rid of him. Here, it's bushfires. Says Turnbull, this is the inevitable consequence of global warming. Funny that. Let's hear it from Turnbull again. These bushfires are utterly without precedent in our history, and the effect on Australia's image abroad has been profound. Well, if you prosecute untruths abroad, you're likely to damage Australia's image. As I've pointed out many times, when Mr Turnbull was unfortunately Prime Minister, in March 2018, the beautiful little community of Tathra on the New South Wales far south coast was appallingly affected by bushfires for 2 days. 69 houses, 30 caravans and cabins destroyed. 39 houses were damaged. The likely cause was not climate change, but the failure of electrical infrastructure. The Greens tried to link the Tathra fire to climate change. Mr Turnbull's response was, quote, I'm disappointed that the Greens would try to politicise an event like this. You can't attribute any particular event, whether it's flood or fire or drought or storm, to climate change. Yet on February 5 this year, he said, these bushfires are utterly without precedent in our history, the consequence of global warming. Is there greater proof of hypocrisy than this? Is there greater proof of the truth that the climate change alarmists will come at anything? And they're being believed. Unprecedented. Well, on February 7, which was 4 days ago, it was 11 years since fires broke out across Victoria, fanned by gusty winds and high temperatures. It was called Black Saturday. Not called that for nothing. 450,000 hectares were burnt out. 173 people died. 414 were injured. 2,029 houses destroyed. But a former Prime Minister says of the past couple of months, these bushfires are utterly without precedent in our history. No one is seeking to dilute the impact of the tragedy of the recent bushfires, but as Chris Kenny rightly wrote at the weekend, climate politics in this country is so wacky that informed adults ought to scoff at them and move on. The real experts about bushfires will tell you over and over again, you can't have a fire without fuel. The betrayal of innocent Australians is the failure to take on the Greens and do something about hazard reduction, a failure to clean and clear the forest floor. Chris Kenny summed it up splendidly at the weekend, and good on him for not giving up. The lady here with me tonight doesn't give up. She too wrote splendidly at the weekend. I'll talk to her about that later. But Chris Kenny said simply and emphatically, The climate debate has turned hysterical and ugly. Scott Morrison must defeat this madness. Climate politics in this country is so wacky that informed adults ought to scoff at them and move on. It's hard in the face of saturation climate change propaganda, but the battle must be joined. This hysteria and new phony religion must be addressed, and it must be beaten.